1 o'clock, and I call the special call meeting of the Portsmouth City Council to order. And Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle.
Here.
Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Glover.
Here.
Mrs. Lucasberg. Here. Mr. Moody.
Here.
Ms. Simmons. Here. Mayor Rowe.
Here. Because this is a special call meeting, Madam Clerk, will you read the call letter, please?
Yes, sir. Members of City Council, please attend a special called meeting of the City Council to be held in the 6th floor conference room, 801 Crawford Street, 1 p.m. Friday, March 8, 2019, for the purpose of discussing the water group. In addition, you may consider a motion to go into closed meeting by order of the mayor.
So that we have understanding, the protocol for the meeting, this is a work session, and so it's done by consensus and not by votes. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct, City Attorney?
Yes, sir.
And because it was called for the one purpose, then no other subject can be discussed.
Correct.
All right. All right, before we get into the discussion, Mr. City Attorney, who owns the property?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council. At present, the deed is with PRHA. That's who has the deed at the present moment. And we are waiting the return of that at some other point in time. But understanding there was some discussion today, I have not heard where it is as of today, but we sent it back to them to have some things corrected.
With the ultimate ownership being in the EDA?
It was being prepared to send to the EDA, correct?
Will you explain the legal status of the Housing Authority and the Economic Development Authority?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, as many of you may know, both the EDA and the PRHA are separate body politics. Although they are appointed by City Council, they are considered separate subdivisions of the Commonwealth, distinct from the City Council.
Political subdivisions of the state.
Correct.
And the City Council has already taken action on this property and on the project, the conditional use permit adopted on February 27th last year,
Yes,
right?
Cool.
And the conditional use permit is still valid and runs with the land?
That's correct.
So whoever owns the land, the conditional use permit is still valid?
Correct.
So that's the action that council can really, the only action that council can take on this property?
Correct.
Okay.
Question there.
Okay, one more thing. And that conditional use permit is valid unless there's some other use that's offered for that property?
Correct, unless somehow it exceeds the permit.
Okay.
The use permit goes with the property, not the owner.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify that.
All right. Vice Mayor, you call the meeting. What outcome would you like to have today?
What I would like is, because we have our city council retreat, we determined that our 4 big things, one of them was the best place for business. And we have a developer who was already granted with the land at 818 an opportunity to develop that property for workforce development housing. The outcome that I would like us to see is to allow them the 120 days to make application to determine if they are eligible for the tax credits. And if they are not, we part ways, shake hands, and move on to the next deal.
But what action do we have in doing that? I mean,
I guess, Attorney, the PRHA currently still owns the deed.
They do have the deed.
Okay, then in conversation with members with Portsmouth Redevelopment Housing Authority, they are willing to allow them to do that, if that is the will of council. If they are still in possession of the property, then they have the opportunity to allow that developer to go in and make application.
well, we just heard that they're a body politic, and so they have that right. We don't have to grant them that right. They have that right anyway.
Okay, all right. then why hasn't it happened?
I understand, I'm with you so far. And
Okay.
I agree that if they still have the property, that it's not ours to do anything about.
Right.
But isn't there a letter of termination from the water group to PRHA?
Yeah,
So they rescinded that request of termination?
right, and it's,
So why don't they just reapply?
we apply for the tax credits?
Yeah. They don't need our permission.
Well, I think that's what they plan on doing, is reapplying. I think their concern was that in their conversation with the Housing Authority had indicated that, well, it's been requested that we transfer the property to EDA. So that's where their concern came from. But as I hear the attorney, that deed is still with PRHA. So PRHA can, they still have the, they're still driving the bus.
Nate?
I guess where I'm at is looking, the only thing that, in my mind, that council could vote on was already done last year. The conditional use permit, it passed. And so now, I guess it should be between WODA Group and PRHA. And if the land does transfer to EDA, it would be between the WODA Group and EDA, because, we don't really, it's not our place to tell either one of those two bodies what to do. So I don't know that there's any really legal action that we can do, because it should be between those two groups as it is now.
Bill?
They did make, and I had Deborah copy everyone on it, that apparently back in '83, there was a resolution denoting that area as a revitalization area. And the language back in '83 compared with what VHDA wants now is a little different. So I've copied everybody on that letter. I don't know if that's something, they seem to think that they'll get the 15 points necessary to get the tax credits if we update that resolution and that wording for the revitalization of the area.
I saw your, are you
Well, I was going to add to that. I don't know if that's a resolution that the Housing Authority can do. Is it something if we see fit that we can do? Council did it back in '83.
I saw the email that you sent about half an hour ago, and it referenced Title 36-1 of the code, and I printed it just before the meeting. And you'll see that the title of the code is called the Housing Authority Law. I would think that we would want to get a recommendation from the Housing Authority on this matter. And everybody have a copy? I just printed what the title is. That's from the code. And get our city attorney to explain to what that particular section of this title pertains to. What do y'all think?
I'm okay with that. I think if, sounds like the ultimate responsibility, since they still have ownership of the property, lies with them. And maybe the changes that they seem to think they need to get the necessary 15 points for their funding, maybe that lies with the Housing Authority.
And it 120 days, we certainly have time for the city attorney to take a look at the title and get the recommendation from, or that section.
Well,
I would think they need
I
it
think
before application.
their application deadline is March the 14th.
That's correct.
There's nothing we can do.
Okay. The request that was in the email was for us to adopt a resolution pursuant to section 36-55.30:2, paragraph A. Mr. City Attorney, what does that paragraph say?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council, I would have to do the research in terms of what that is and what those impacts would be, because this is the first time I'm hearing about that particular section or that request.
Is this something that would require a public hearing, or do you know? That's probably an unfair question to ask.
I wouldn't know.
Just so what?
How about if we ask the city attorney to look at that section and determine what it is, and with the determination whether or not we need a public hearing? Is that a consensus?
Yeah, I guess we need to.
Yes.
Keeping in mind that there is a deadline involved.
Well, I think we need to understand,
To
he
make
needs
an
to understand.
application.
Yeah, he needs to understand what that section is. I mean,
Certainly, Mayor, members of council, I understand that there's some time constraints with regard to that, and we'll certainly do the best we can in terms of trying to get you all up to speed to what is being asked of City Council today.
Shannon, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just listening to the discussion, and I heard something mentioned about 120-day extension or time frame in which someone has to get a decision rendered on whether or not they earn tax credits. I guess my question is, with the understanding that the deed is still with the housing authority, the developer wants to, based on a discussion, I guess, file for tax credits again this year to see if they meet the qualifications to be awarded those credits. And there's a process also that I heard that the land is still in process of being transferred. Is that correct? Or is that not in process because it's deeded still to PRHA? Am I missing something in the discussion?
Well, my question was simple, which was, who owns the land? And it's owned by the housing authority.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I was hearing that correctly.
We don't own it,
No.
Right,
and the EDA doesn't own it.
right.
Okay,
And-
so,
And they don't need, they being the developer, doesn't need our permission to file for tax credits.
correct, that's exactly.
And our
that. I
conditional use
understand that.
permit is still valid.
Right.
It's not been rescinded, it runs with the land. And so it sounds like to me they need to get the application in. And with most applications, if this would help their application, we certainly could consider adopting it through the normal process of having a recommendation, having it looked at. I mean, I don't know what that section is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Craig Patterson is the attorney on the Wooder Group. He is acting attorney for the Wooder Group.
He's not our attorney, though.
He's not ours. Oh,
And
And
No.
he's asking us to adopt this.
Right.
This is probably beyond the scope of the city council, but I'm just curious, technically, if the WODA group has issued a letter in writing to PRHA withdrawing their application, or negating their contract, or whatever the proper term is, but the property is still held by PRHA, does that mean that they have to go back and renegotiate with PRHA and get that all done before the 14th?
Yeah, they would have to have another purchase agreement.
And that's required, I think, for the
VHDA
application.
requires a
Yeah,
purchase
purchase
agreement,
agreement.
because I've
Yeah.
done work with VHDA.
yeah.
They
In
require
any-
a purchase.
In any event, we,
Yeah,
the
we're
city,
not
does not own the property. Yeah. And so,
So they got some fast work to do. is
yeah,
what
they
you're
got some
Yeah.
fast work to do.
Okay.
Well,
Okay, then there's nothing for us to do,
all right,
except wait to hear from Solomon on that particular
okay. What,
part, right?
good? Any other business, any other discussion? All right, this meeting is adjourned.